Hello and welcome. I'm Gauhar Raza and you are watching Eureka, a program that brings scientists face to face with you. Today we have a special guest, a scientist of the first rank, an educationist of the first order, a teacher, highly lovable, a man who has built institutions one after the other. And when it's so difficult to introduce such a person, it's only a poet which can help. मत सहल हमें जानो फिरता है फलक बरसों तब खाक के पर्दे से इंसान निकलते हैं. Do not consider us to be common. The cosmos wanders restlessly for eons, and then a human being like him comes out of the veils of clay. Welcome, Professor C N R Rao. It's great to have you here.
Nice to be here.
At Rajya channel.
Nice to be here.
But before I begin my first question and shoot it, let's watch this.
Science will continue as long as human beings are around because it is the creative urge of man. I think we should do something for rural India because the future talent of India to do creative things or innovative things in India will come from rural India. I am very proud of my students. I will give everything I have to my students. In fact, that is the way a teacher should be. The qualities required to succeed are hard work, perseverance, and doggedness.
Before I was coming here, I rang up a very dear young friend of mine who is studying in a school and asked him, if you were a fortunate person like I am, what first question would you ask? And he said that ask him, how did he deal with distractions to achieve so much in life? What would be your answer?
Well, this is an amazing thing. Life without distractions, life without variety and diversity is very difficult to live with. So you must have distraction. There's nothing you can do about it. Well, what happens is everyone, particularly a person who is worthwhile, has something that he wants to do beyond the call of everything. So the kind of passion that makes him do certain things. It's not because of the job, not because of the salary, not because of satisfying somebody else, not because of his masters, just because he's that innate urge of human beings. The greatest poetry comes from poets of that kind. Greatest science comes from those people whose urge really leads them on and they keep doing things. In fact, somehow I was not so much involved in science when I was a little young, but so after about 30, 40, I got very much involved in it. The real absorption in science started when I was 60. In fact, the science I'm doing increased enormously at the age of 60. In fact, you see the citations or how much I've cited and what I've done after 60. And then suddenly at 70, it became exponential. It got up like that. In fact, my best work in science actually I've done after 70. Now I'm 81. So what I'm saying is age has nothing to do with it. It's a question of how you keep on build up on your experience, take in new things that are in the world, and keep doing it. This takes all your time and energy, and that's how it is.
You have been a restless child at 81. A restless child, inquisitive, thinking about new things, coming up with new ideas. Were you a restless child?
Not so restless, I'm afraid. What happens is, this urge I talked about just a minute ago is then that makes you restless. If you want to accomplish something, you don't have infinite time in the world. As Michael Faraday long ago said, don't forget, God Almighty, he said in his case, I'm quoting him, thought time was so valuable, he only gave a limited amount of that to you. You don't live forever. Within that time, you have to do something. So you have to rush. If you don't rush and take all your time, you can also do some small thing. But you have to do a lot of things, influence your own subject, influence your own field, and do something for your society, do for your fellow human beings. It takes a lot of effort and you have to be rushing a bit.
And then you have to keep your distractions under
a bit
check.
away, and then not sacrifice quality in all this. Just because you're doing a little bit in a hurry doesn't mean you sacrifice quality. You have to all the time be mindful of quality and not compromise to mediocrity.
Let's go back to memory lanes.
Right.
You were not admitted for a long time into a school, and you give all the credit of primary education to your mother.
That's right.
How was father
You see, my father was a wonderful person. You see, he had several master's degrees. He was in the education department. And he never forced me to do things. And parents who trusted me, who thought my judgment was good enough, that they would encourage me to do whatever I want. And that's what I would of my father. But more than that, he said, English is so important. You should know very good English. So he would always speak to me in English half the time. So that even as a child, so that I was never short of vocabulary, I was never short of words and so on. And my mother, of course, taught me all kinds of things in chemistry, arithmetic and that type of stuff.
You participated in freedom movement as
Little bit.
You were influenced by it.
Absolutely.
How much was the influence on teachers, schools, and yourself?
You see, I had a teacher. I tell you one example only to tell you, illustrates you to you what the kind of thing I had. I had a wonderful teacher. I'll never forget him. And I just joined high school. He said, one day, Mahatma Gandhi is coming to Madras, what is now called Chennai. Any student who wants to go, I will take them to see Mahatma Gandhi. Then I went, pestered my father, give me 5 rupees. It only cost very little to go by train. You must give me. My father said, no, what is there? Just to go and see him and come back. No, I must see him. My father said, okay, fine. He gave me. I will never forget that. I was exactly 10 years old or 11 years old then. Went all the way overnight train to see Mahatma Gandhi, just saw him and came back. This kind of teachers. And I used to wear a khadar cap up to my pre-university, the nationalism. My father was a nationalist, actually. In fact, he was believing in Gandhian movement, basic education. But Zakir Hussain was a great admirer of Zakir Hussain, for example, my father, the education. So I was influenced by that type of atmosphere.
So it is the society, school, house,
Correct,
environment around you that molded you into a scientist later on, and a first-rate scientist.
If you remember, the nationalist movement was, if you really go back to those days of, say, 1940s or 45, 47, it was a very exciting period.
Very exciting period.
I still remember in August 15th, 47, I just entered college a couple of months before that, PU University, whatever you call it, Nehru speech at midnight. My God. In that entire road, in that place, our house was the only one with a radio. The entire huge crowd of people listened to the radio that had come to our house. I'll never forget that. What an experience. That is one reason, you see, why you love India, why you love our country, is because of this kind of a experience which is very difficult to forget.
And is it because of that you thought that you will be one of the votaries of building India into a strong country?
One of the reasons I came back. I tell you, when I finished my PhD, postdoctoral work and all that, I did extremely well in America. By that time, I already had about 28 research papers. I was just 24, 25 years old. I've been offered very outstanding universities. I don't want to mention names here, they're unimportant. As an assistant professor with the promise of promotion in 2 years as associate professor in American universities. Then I said, look, I better decide one and for all. Either I go now or I will be here forever. Then, amazingly, Indian Institute of Science offered me a lecturership at that time. Well, my mother said, why don't you come back? You've been there for almost 6 years in America. I said, well, I should go back. I could never forget the fantastic memories of India.
We'll continue the discussion. Don't go anywhere. We'll come back soon. I have to take a break. Welcome back. We were discussing the exciting period that you have gone through and your generation has gone through. You went abroad at the behest of your parents, or you decided that you will go, or teachers molded you to go to United States?
I did my master's degree. Those days, to get a good MSc, like in Benares, you had to do part thesis, part coursework. I did my first piece of research there. I even published 2 The very important papers at that period.
When did you publish your first paper?
When I was about in 1953-54.
53, 54.
In fact, I wrote a small note in Science magazine, which is a very prestigious magazine even today. It got published. Here I am, a little kid from India. So, I thought I would do work here. I, in fact, started doing work here for PhD. Then, I was very much inspired by Linus Pauling. Linus Pauling had just discovered the structure of the protein, the first structure of the alpha helix. I said, that is the kind of work I want to do. So I wrote to him, in fact, at that time. Then I decided to go back, and he suggested I work with one of his former students. Anyway, I thought, in India, there was no one who was up to date in science of that kind. I wanted to do stuff based on atoms, molecules. They were all just then coming up. If you remember in 1950, just then the idea of molecules, the idea of structure of molecules was coming, and I thought I must do that. That is why I went to the United States.
If I calculate, then on an average, every 15 day of your life, you have been publishing one paper.
Well, that depends how you call it. You can say I've had a large number of students. You see, I've had more than 160 or 150 young boys and girls have got PhDs with me. A large number of people have worked as assistants, postdoctoral fellows. If you count all of them, they all done a lot of work. I may have the idea, but I sit with them. But I work with my students. My way of guiding is every day I see my students, I work with them. I don't allow them to waste too much time, so I get more results. So within much shorter time than many others, I get more results. And also I compete with the rest of the world. You have to compete with the best in the world, in which case, as I said, I can't take too much rest. So I make my students also become like that. So in my 50th book is just going to print next week, in fact.
You have never failed to acknowledge your students and your co-researchers.
I owe them a lot.
Do you feel that science is not an individual activity anymore? It is individual creativity mixed with efforts of others and creating an environment of creativity.
There's more and more
around
group work. In fact, you collaborate and you do many more things. But eventually, the desire to do something important, getting a new idea is still an individual thing. What is important is that we must create in India an atmosphere where individuals start thinking of big ideas, and that's very, very important. Group, I think, is well, but you need individuals, still outstanding individuals, there's no question.
You have been always very close to children and very concerned about the education system in the country. You have a lot of criticism of education system today, but you don't only criticize, you also have a training program running in your institute. How is it coming up?
Well, we are doing a lot in our institute. In fact, well, you may believe it or not, 50% of all the money I have earned in life, in various awards, it comes to 3-4 crores of rupees. Half of it I've given away for this work. I created a foundation. We are encouraging children from all over. In fact, we have sponsored a lot of things in Uttarakhand. Every year I go to Gangoli Ghat, to Pithoragarh, that area. Also in Kerala, several places. A lot of individual children who are in need of help, we help them. That is only one small aspect. The bigger aspect is I go about at least 10 or 12 places a year to remote parts of India, not in Bombay or Delhi. That is not my main target. Interior, like recently I had gone to Jorhat to give a lecture. There were 1,500 children. It's really inspiring to give them. Those are the kids that inspire me. And they're really full of life. Those shining eyes of those children from the interior India. Similarly, if you go to the mountains of India, those children walk several miles every day to go to school. And those children want to learn something. And I want to go and give lectures to them. My wife and I go with many of our colleagues. I take many others also. We do quite a bit of this. Unfortunately, I have only limited time and energy because my research will suffer if I did too much. But therefore, we started a Hall of Science in Bangalore, where every month we run a program for children, about 200 to 300 children every month.
You are restless about the education system of today. What is basically
I tell you, the problem is like this. There are three things you expect out of it. Education, first of all, is for enlightenment, just because you want to be a better human being, better citizen. But it is also for employment, livelihood. Third, most important, for the enlightened citizenship, not just citizenship, but having a right kind of scientific attitude. So you help society better, you're a better citizen of the world, etc. All these 3 or 4 things we have to accomplish. And the second one, the employment. If you even take that one aspect, which is really not important in some ways, but that's what everyone wants, the employment out of education. Look at what are we doing. We are having millions and millions of children. We are misguiding most of them. Like Bangalore has, for example, 67 engineering colleges in one city. Everybody is going to engineering. Half of them don't get jobs. Is that the way to plan education? Similarly, you take any other professional education, there are 30 management degree, MBA, 30 institutions in Bangalore give MBAs. Overproducing in some areas. And at the same time, we don't have experts in many areas. That is one aspect. Second, in another 15 years, we'll have another 3 to 4 crores additional children coming for education, higher education in India. How are we going to take care of them? What have we planned for them? So I believe the time has come for a new plan for education for India. And I've been requesting, been requesting by the previous President Manmohan Singh used to agree. He said, let us do that. Somehow time we couldn't do that. I hope the present government will take it seriously. We have to chalk out a well-orchestrated program for the future of the children. Otherwise, if they are unhappy, the population will be unhappy, the country won't be the same. I think education is, in that sense, is very important. Then, of course, you need expertise, scientists, engineers. I'm not talking about the professional part of it. The minimum education for the children, I think I'm really worried about that. The investment in education, let me tell you, national policy on education. I also helped Mr. Narasimha Rao when he was education minister. We all helped him to write that policy. They said 66% of GDP will go to education. That was in 1986, 87. Now, still we are investing 2%. Just 2%, including higher education. What do you expect, As a joke, somebody was telling me, what do you get? As the famous American statement, if you get peanuts, what do you get? You get monkeys. They say jocularly. Yes. There is some truth in that. We invest so little in education, so little on science. Science is worse than education in some investments. We should not forget. Every country which has become militarily powerful and economically powerful, they improved their manufacturing first. Then they said, no, that is all okay. They had to be number one in science. America is number one in everything because it's number one in science. China is trying hard to become number one in science now because they're already ahead in manufacturing. South Korea is doing the same. We should not forget that. You can't just be very wonderful in manufacturing and so-called progress and development without science. Progress and development only with science. Then only you can, long-term growth will be there.
You've been a firm votary of a scientific temper in the country. Were you inspired by Nehru,
Absolutely.
that period, and how do you continue? How do you continue spreading scientific temper in today's India?
Well, let us take Mr. Nehru, since you mentioned it. People, whatever they may say about anything else about Nehru, one thing, imagine in 1958, when India was still poor, we were not in a great shape, he passes the science policy resolution in the parliament. How many countries did that? A poor country without much to offer had a science policy resolution. He really believed science will be part of India's development and progress. And science will be part of every human being of India so that he will be a better citizen, better human being and so on. So I think I still know that. Look at, I do not believe in a country with superstition. I do not want a country with where our superstition and blind faith will somehow will not take us far. Eventually, if India has to go really become one of the top countries in the world, not only in science but in other areas, I think we need a different type of citizen, and that is where scientific temper comes.
You mentioned science policy resolution. It's amazing for a person like me who is working in the area that there was not a single voice in parliament, in the whole entire parliament, which opposed any part of that scientific policy resolution.
In fact, people have tried to rewrite it. They cannot improve on the language. He says, we will see that all the benefits that can come from science, that can accrue from science, will reach our Indian population. What can you better way of putting it? I think it's a fantastic resolution, and I think we should still do that.
Simply great to discuss science policy resolution, which inspired my generation to do good science in the country. However, who all inspired you in this journey?
Well, there are two things. As a child, it was C V Raman. C V Raman was in Bangalore.
He wrote to you?
Well, that was much later. When I was a student child, I was about exact 1945. I was 11 years old. He came to our school. There were only 4 schools in Bangalore those days. One college. Those days, and he came and gave a lecture. I saw he was, the way he used to hold on to his coat, jacket and shouting and talking like that. My God, I said, I want to be like that. And then he told our teacher, why don't you bring one or two bright students of the school to Indian Show Science and show them around. I was one of them. I will never forget, 1945, I will still remember that. And after that, of course, I got to know him very well. When I was a staff member in the institute, I was a young man. He helped me in many ways. But what happened was, I wrote the first book of mine when I was 26 years old, came from London. He had already seen that. It was an ultraviolet spectroscopy. I wrote a second book, which is a 700-page book, published by Academic Press, New York, 1963 it came. And he saw that book. And then he wrote a letter, Dear Dr. Rao, I have seen this book written by you on infrared spectroscopy. Anyone who can write this book, such a book, should be a member of the Indian Academy of Sciences. If you don't mind, I will see that you become a member. How many people do that? I didn't know him well or anything. That was the first recognition in my life. A year later, 2 years later, I got the first international medal as the most outstanding young physical chemist. I got the Marlowe Medal of the Faraday Society in England. That was 2 years later. But the first was CV Raman. I mean, I will never forget him. He was a very great man, actually.
And Faraday also has been
Faraday is my personal hero. You see, he came with 3 years of schooling. Look at what he became. He is the world's greatest scientist. Nobody can beat his record. He wrote 450 papers single-handedly. No student, no government grant, nothing. One man sitting. And the number of discoveries he made. As Lord Rutherford
changed the entire world.
The entire world. Lord Rutherford said, if only he lived in 20th century, he would have got at least 6 Nobel Prizes. Absolutely correct. At least 4 he would have got. Some young man asked him, Mr. Faraday, tell me in simple words, what is doing science? What is doing science about? Oh, it is nothing. Work, finish, and publish. That is science.
And that is what you have been doing.
I am doing that.
You've been following.
I am inspired by these people. I don't want anything more. To me, these are the people who lived a life of a kind which is worth emulating. And there are many things. I'm not saying they are perfect human beings. That's not important. But the question is, the way they did science, the way they created ideas. You see, the intelligent people try to understand the secret of creativity. If you only understand how these people created ideas, I think that you have learned a lot.
What was the greatest moment of Eureka in your life?
Very difficult to pick one moment. But one moment, one or two, which I will never forget, is, 1986, I don't know whether you know the story of modern science. 86, a major thing happened in physical sciences. In December 1986, suddenly superconductivity, high temperature superconductivity was discovered. Till then, superconducting transition was up to 23 Kelvin. Suddenly, somebody found it was an oxide. In an oxide, it up to 35 Kelvin, a bit higher. That became, my God, how did it become 35? For years, it was 23 Kelvin is the highest. People tried very hard to get it higher, to higher temperatures. They couldn't do that. So then I found, in fact, there was a very big conference in Bangalore at the time. Nobel laureate Anderson had come. He wanted to talk to me about that. I didn't know why. I said, why? Well, don't you know about this new discovery? Well, it is an oxide on which you are working on, of the kind you are working on. In fact, in Kanpur in 1971, the parent oxide of this family had done published papers on it. But unfortunately, our facilities were such, I could never have measured the low temperature properties of these oxides then. But, oh, is that so? I said, I didn't know. That was, this Professor Anderson told me in that December 86. I will never forget that. And then, I started working on it. And then everybody in the world wanted to make a superconductor which becomes superconductor at much higher temperature, at liquid nitrogen temperature. This is all at liquid helium, which is very low. So I started working on that Bangalore. My God, day and night. Bell Labs did that. Chinese did that independently. My friend Zhao in China. And we did independently. I published that in Nature in March 1987. I remember that morning when I found a 90 Kelvin superconducting transition in my lab. I said, my God. In Bangalore, in India, this poor country having the transition first about liquid nitrogen. I will never forget that day, for example.
How did you celebrate that?
I was the director of the Indian Institute of Science that time. Oh, immediately I started writing, sent a paper of Nature. Immediately they accepted it. And then they said, please send these changes by fax. There was no fax machine in Indian Institute of Science. Look at, I've gone through life in all aspects. I come from the time when the research, the total grant for the entire department I was in was 45,000 rupees per year. Just now, when I say now, just yesterday to be exact, I have completed a manuscript on something new which I have done, completely new, which nobody else ever done. But there's a tremendous, it has such a big future. There are hundreds of people working on this now. So when you discover something like that, you feel very good. And you go on worrying about trying to, but you don't do that every day. Every one, now and then you get one or two ideas like that. You wait for those ideas, you wait for those moments. And they are the moments of Eureka moments, as you call them.
Which award do you value the most?
Well, in terms of the very first medal was important. I told you, one Britain. After that, recently, the three medals I have got, three awards. The Dan David Prize is like a Nobel Prize, a $1 million award, which I shared with Professor Whitesides of Harvard. It was a very important medal. That for chemistry of materials. And second was the Royal Medal that the Queen, the Royal Society gave. And then the Germans gave an international medal called the August Wilhelm von Hofmann Medal for an international personality who they think is one of the greatest chemists of that time. I got that about a few years ago. These are two or three which are important ones.
You've also got one very recently, Japanese award.
But that is a
Civilian
total
award.
thing. That is the Order of the Rising Sun, Gold and Silver Star. They gave that.
But you have given all the credit for that award to your students.
Students,
and
absolutely.
your-
Students, and I had a wonderful wife, I had a wonderful family. That is another thing. You have to have a peaceful mind. I enjoy life. I don't cry. In fact, I try to smile as much as I can. And I had a wonderful family, and it's very important. Those who fight with their wives every day can never do good science.
May I request you to give a message to the younger generation?
Well, what I feel is my own story is simple. Anyone who wants to do something, is mad, crazy to do something, can do it. All it requires is doggedness, dedication, and tenacity. DDT, as I call it. And somebody said in IIT Bombay when I gave this lecture, you mentioned these three. What about intelligence? Yeah, that comes last, not the first.
Follow DDT and be mad about it. That is the message we take back home. If you have a question, query, or comment, do write to us at eurekarstv@gmail.com. That's all for now. Till next week, goodbye.